Okay, so we're going to talk about BMPs, something I really enjoy talking about. I flunked speech 4 times when I went to college, and finally they said, why don't you take a class in interpersonal communication? And the lady, my teacher, said, why don't you talk about something that you like? At the time I was taking watershed management and erosion control. I was studying erosion control of elk trails in the Redwood National Park. Anyway, just wind me up and get me talking about erosion control and I can't stop. So if you ever have trouble speaking in front of groups, remember, talk about something that you like. You know, you don't, imagining the audience naked and stuff, all that it didn't work for me. So it was just distracting. So anyway, we're going to talk about BMPs, one of my favorite things, and how to put the best back in your BMPs, how to make them effective. It might sound funny to be doing a keynote on that, but that's, again, it's what I like. It's what seems to interest us. It really is what drives the Clean Water Act. They are the methods of compliance. They're how we do it. That's where the rubber meets the road. We've got all these other things involved, and we have to understand the BMPs. As Marlena gave a really good curriculum vitae of me, I'm missing a class this week at Shasta College. I've been teaching there for 22 years. On Friday afternoons, I teach an erosion and sediment control class, and we have a erosion control training facility. You'll get to see that, pictures of that as we come on. I would like you to visit our new website when you get a chance, dirttime.tv. It's got a plethora of information on erosion and sediment control. And hopefully we'll get a chance to talk. As Marlena mentioned, I also built and developed some Dirt Time videos. Wanted to do more education, kind of like Bob Villa, This Old House, and a little bit of Tim the Toolman Taylor and Home Improvements kind of thing, how to put in a silt fence, how to do this, how to do that. And we have 50-some episodes or clips out there. The drawings that you see, the typical drawings, were developed by me through Erosion Draw. So if you're thinking about developing a BMP manual or want to look at a BMP manual, I have a couple I brought with me. I've updated some of the Caltrans manuals and some of the other state and federal manuals, and I have what I think is a really good BMP manual here. I would give you a free download of it if you contact me through Dirt Time and let me know you would like a free download. And can you play this one for me?
Hey everybody, welcome to Dirt Time. You know, today's episode is going to be really cool. This is our extreme slope erosion control stabilization episode. Ditch check episode. Shoreline protection. We're in the Canadian Rockies. Fairbanks, Alaska. The Hinton 2 project. So we're doing bioengineering. Gravel bag check dam. Live siltation. Landslide repair. Joint planting. The EnviroBurn. Engineered log jams. Root wads in there. Energy dissipators. The rolling dip. A stormwater detention basin. The duckbill. This is a coir log. Triangular silt dike. A live pole drain. Articulated concrete blocks. The fascine bundle. Rock-filled Gabion baskets. Modified mechanically bonded fiber matrix. Modified gravel bag check. EnviroBurn. Native this is the native seed. So we're doing live staking here. Mechanically bonded fiber matrix. I want to get some fine spray. We know mulch is good. This is the native seed. About 150 pounds per acre. 6 inches of base. We want it to sheet off this way. All the way up the slope here. Seed all the way up through there. There's one, there's one. Working good. This is your driver. You got to get them all the way in. This check dam, it's holding back 1,200 gallons of water. Look at the erosion. The worst thing you could do is use the stupid BMPs. It's like a little Gabion basket, 1/4-inch hole. These branches will be planted some rocks along in here. This will be our construction unit. Next bag on top of it. Now with a few extra root wads in there and deflecting the water down. A live pole drain, or a draining fascine we call it. Laid these boulder clusters out in the river there, modified brush layers. Compost blanket down. The seed is in the mix already. Articulate concrete blocks. You can see how the blocks lock together. I feel good about this. I can't wait. Next to hands-on, the next best thing might be watching a video. If you have less runoff, guess what? You have less discharge. 90% of the erosion energy in the world is raindrop erosion. So what's the treatment for that? I just named 4 practices that go for erosion control that are greater than 90% effective, if you do it right. How do you choose your BMP? Let's put our BMPs in a toolbox so you grab the right one. And we've got soil prep BMPs, we have erosion control BMPs. Now we're talking sustainable erosion control, right?
So we're going to talk about the BMPs today, the types of BMPs as they relate to the erosion, so the types and kinds of erosion. Remember, raindrop erosion is different than runoff erosion, okay? That's going to get us a long way. So we understand the physical processes, and then we can select the appropriate BMP to go with that process. How many of you would really love to be able to inspect or review an erosion control plan and feel very knowledgeable and confident in what you're looking at? How many would like to be able to do that? And how many would like to be, when you're out in the field and installing something, know that you probably did it right, or at least you've got all the principles right? You know, how many would like to do that? Or when you're talking to Buck, you know, the construction foreman who's out there, and you're inspecting the site, and he's been there 40 years, and he goes, you know, get on out of here. I've been doing erosion control since you were a little tiny tot. You know, I know more about this. And actually, they haven't had any classes in this and stuff. So again, I want you to be confident that you have the understanding on how to do this. So confident review plans, and we're going to look at implementation of the BMPs. And they are the tools of compliance, as I mentioned. One of the things that greatly helped me was to put the BMPs in a toolbox based on the type of practice that we need. So this training is going to be about putting our BMPs in that toolbox and getting it right. There's all sorts of courses out there about protocol, about SWIPs. There's, in California, you have to have a 22-hour training to be a qualified SWIP developer, a QSD. What does it require here to do a stormwater plan? Any civil engineer can do it? Who else can do it? Anybody? Anybody want to do it? Anybody wants to do it can do it? Who usually does it? Engineering firms? Okay. Okay, well, there's a lot of trainings, and I bet you that a lot of the engineering firms have been to these trainings, 22-hour trainings that tell you how to develop a stormwater plan, how to do inspections, when you're a qualified storm event, all of those kinds of things. And that's not much talking about the BMPs. One of the most important BMPs are those that get vegetation to come back. And generally, civil engineers don't necessarily have a lot of training in vegetative establishment. So there's a whole realm of this that maybe they're not exactly qualified for. Civil engineering was definitely qualified for all the hydraulic stuff. I wouldn't want to go out and design pipes and culverts and stuff without consulting a civil engineer to do some of the hydraulic calculations. Neither should a civil engineer call out some of the vegetative practices when they had no experience with those kinds of things. And soil compaction, you know what we're doing now is we're decompacting the soils. If we want compliance, how many of you would love to have compliance, would love to have your notice of termination approved immediately so you could get out from under the stormwater plan? How many would like that? So what's your goal? When you start the project, you should start it with the end in sight. And what's the end is to get that notice of termination, notice of completion, right? And what's that going to come from? Finishing the project, moving all your erosion control materials off the site, and having, what, 70% cover of what was there originally? Adequate cover? Shouldn't we maybe start our plan with cover as our goal? Maybe things like compost, adding some compost to the soil, to really bad soil, thinking, at least when you go on there, how am I going to vegetate this? It's no longer, and I do this training with DOTs all across the nation, Alberta, New Zealand, and it's no longer okay for the civil to do the engineering parts of the highway projects and then just kind of leave the rest of it as an afterthought. It's okay to do that, but it ends up costing a lot of money, and you come back. And then how about the requirement for plant establishment? 3-year plant establishment. Are we going to wait for 3 years to do plant establishment, and the whole time that project is under a SWIP, where you're getting, how often do you have to do your inspections here? Like before, during, and after every storm event? Do you do inspections? Just a nod. Just okay. So you have to do, according to the Clean Water Act, we have to do inspections periodically before, in California, before, during, after a rain event, and also at least once a week, even in the dry season. That's a lot of paperwork, and you have to do all those things during this whole period while you're under a SWIP. So I want to get the SWIPs done, get the notice of completion, start looking at vegetation for that. So we're not going to do this qualified SWIP developer training. One of the things that's really informative is to talk to Junior Raindrop and Papa Cloud and see what's going on with them. Can you play this one for me?
Have you ever wondered about a raindrop's family? Let's drop in on Papa Cloud and Junior Raindrop. Uh-oh.
Junior, get up, get up. It's time for you to visit your Mother Earth.
Oh, Pop. Let me stay here with you.
Stop your pouting, and mind you, behave yourself. Get along now. Off with you. Go along, son.
The automatic cloud gates open wide and out tumble millions of earthbound raindrops.
Fine welcome this is. Mother Earth can't kick me around. I'll run away.
So, Junior joins a group of other raindrops looking for excitement. The bare soil speeds them on their way. Nobody seems to care what they do. As he passes by, Junior hears some plants talking. Some are so sick from having too many cows and sheep chewing on them, it will take years to get well. Other plants are dying from the same cause. They say unless fewer cattle and sheep are allowed on watersheds like this, ruin will follow.
Gosh, I hope this watershed isn't made better, because if it is, we can't slide on it anymore.
Oh, well, let's leave Junior to himself for a while. You know, little runaway raindrops love forests where too many trees have been cut down and rangelands that are overgrazed. They especially love burned over spots like this to dig their heels into. These hoodlum raindrops leave a trail of erosion, wasting soil that is needed to grow plants for grazing cattle and sheep, and trees for timber, soil that is needed for growing food, soil needed to store some of that water. They choke streams, oiling water needed for our farms, our industries and homes. They leave silt in reservoirs, wasted work. Reservoirs are built to store water, not mud. Well, I wonder what's happened to Junior. Just what I feared. He's formed a gang, and they're whooping it up for a flash flood. They're rushing down the canyon. They've made a wall of water 20 feet high. Look out! Too late. Now Junior is a real outlaw. No longer satisfied with flash floods, the gang is planning bigger and wetter floods. Junior's getting dangerous. He's getting tougher and bolder every day. Now he's tough gangster. Heading for the big time, raging along, waging gang war. Robbing, destroying, killing. And all because somebody started a forest fire.
All because no one cared about Junior Raindrop. Now, if Junior had fallen on something soft, I call it cush for his tush, he wouldn't have gotten a bad attitude. You know how vulnerable children are that first couple of years that they're born, okay? And he falls on a soft cushion of vegetation. Or if it's not vegetation, it could be straw. Or it could be a bonded fiber matrix. It could be hydromulch. Do you think Junior knows the difference between landing on a grass and landing on a soft erosion control product? He doesn't know the difference. And if there's some grass already growing, Junior can just hang on, fall down the limb and go down and just let himself down and actually kind of sink into the soil. And he can go back into the soil, run through the soil as subsurface flow, come out at the streams or out at the ocean where he's nice and clean, and he can add and play with fishermen, and he can make home for little fish and stuff. But the alternative is Junior starts running with a gang, he starts hanging with a gang, they're selling crack cocaine on the street corner, they're carrying weapons and stuff. The only thing we can do is surround them and catch them in a sediment pond. And we don't have much luck. It's like putting them in prison. And then I like to think of it, we take all the kids and shake them upside down so they have switchblade knives fall out of their pockets and stuff. We've got to hold them for a certain amount of time. And then what do you do with them? Do you put them in juvenile hall? Do you send them off to prison for the rest of their life? What do you do? So that's the story of Junior Raindrop. So the raindrop impact is the number one precursor of, it is the erosion. 90% of the erosion in the world happens with the raindrop falling out of the sky. My physics professor at Humboldt State University showed that a raindrop will fall the average distance of 30 feet and reach its maximum velocity. It could fall out of a tree and reach maximum velocity. That is the energy that dislocates the soil particle. It doesn't matter where we are, in what part of the world we're at. In the desert, when the rains come, the raindrop is going to dislodge the soil particle, or you're not going to have erosion. And then we have this, are we going to let Junior gang up and run as a gang? Because when they start running as gangsters, that's not raindrop erosion at all. What is that? That's the tractive force of flowing water. That's an entirely different physical process. Does straw mulch work for concentrated flows? Does it gangster action, I call it? What can work on gangster action? What kind of BMP? Name one. We could put them in a culvert. The culvert won't erode. Cement. We could figure out whether cement or concrete or steel fabricated pipe would be better. What's the better thing? We could put them in ditches and then armor the ditches so that the little guys that are on chocolate and stuff, and they've got skateboards, right? And they're ripping it up. They're doing half pipes and stuff, and they want to tear up that channel. And so we could line the channel with something they can't destroy. And that would be like a turf reinforcement mat, strong enough to inhibit, but we're not going to be able to do things with mulch and hydromulch. Okay, and then the last thing we're going to do is try to corral them into a sediment pond. So here's our little Junior Raindrop, this little guy right here. And as parents, what are we going to do? Get an insurance policy and hope that he lives to 11 years old, you know? Maybe what would be the best thing to do if I was a parent is I would be throwing gravel in front of him so he could never get going fast, right? At least he'd be on a skateboard, but he couldn't get going really fast. So that would be one way to do it. We could certainly cover the ground and have cush for his tush, and then we could also roughen the soil. Oh, you mean I can't make the soil slick and hard? Backblade it with the loader? What about the motor grader? Shall I blade it really smooth and hard? Shall I run the excavator, clean the slope up and down? Shall I use the teeth and scarify the slope up and down the slope? No. I was just making a bunch of half pipes. Junior and his gang will be so happy with you if you did that. They'll be doing these snowboard deals and skateboarding and surfing. And so we want to do our striations across the slope. We want to roughen Junior up, roughen the ground up. So hopefully you're never going to do things different. We can slow Junior down, break up the slope length. One of the ways of doing that is with slope interrupters. And you're all probably familiar. This is California. We use slope interrupters like candy or something. You know, we put them everywhere to break slope up. And then there's battles within the various counties about what kind you're going to use. Like in Orange County, they're really rich down there in Orange County, and they buy their logs from coconut logs from Sri Lanka. They're not going to allow straw in Orange County. But anyway, you break up the slope length, and there's in the manual, there's some, of course, if the slope's steeper, you'll put your slope interrupter sooner, because Junior can get going too fast. If he's gentler, you can have them farther apart. Does that make sense? Okay, we're going to demonstrate slope interrupters. Here's an example. I worked for several years for the state vehicle recreation area. This is a place where they ride motorcycles, and they're pretty thrashed watersheds, actually, already. And back in the early 20s and stuff, they were having these motorcycle climbs, these races. They were using alcohol-fueled motorcycles and alcohol-fueled guys with short necks. And you know, just crazy what they were doing. And they're still doing it today. They'll climb these hills, but now it's a family deal. You go out and have little places that you camp there, and the motorcycle, the husbands get to race these motorcycles. And anyway, because Kawasaki and Yamaha sponsor it, and there's so much money, 20,000 people come to one of these events, that there's money to go back and fix the slopes afterwards. And they're fixing it right now. Those are inmate crews, California inmates. I'd like to see more of this kind of work. We've been letting them out too often, and before they let them out of prison, we should be putting them on these crews and let them work a little bit on that. And there's putting fiber rolls. They track walk that slope. Can you imagine it? Somebody ran a bulldozer up and down that slope. And this was just 7 months later. So it does work. Slope interrupters. Junior could not get going. And he could not gangster up. And that's what we want. You want to stop those rills. The rills become gullies and so on. That's just an extreme. So they scaled the slopes. They track walked it. By the way, that's 52% effective. They put straw wattles. They put mycorrhizae fungus, because that's important relationship with the native grasses. They used organic fertilizer, so they didn't kill the microbes. We're going to be at a compost facility tomorrow. We don't want to kill the microbes. We want the microbes in the soil. They actually sequester carbon also in the soil. It's our last big opportunity to sequester carbon. And then we use California native grasses. So Caltrans has got this $300 million fine, and they're developing protocol and trainings and stuff, and in lieu of paying it, they've got a test facility, a test bed, which they tilt up 2 to 1, and they put various practices on it. And we studied track walking. They took the grousers off a D6 dozer, and they put it up on that test bed, and the engineering students at University of San Diego, and they rained on it. A 10-year return interval storm for LA, and that was 1.75 inches in an hour. That's a pretty good storm. Your windshield wipers are doing double time. You could be careening off the highway if you're not careful. And they tested it, set it down, dried it, replicated it 16 times. And they found that track walking is 52% effective. How many BMPs out there are 52% effective that you know of? What's a gravel bag in a curb? 3%. Studies have been done. We're talking 52%. If you turn that dozer around and walk it up and down the slope. Now the next thing Caltrans decided to do, they couldn't get the contractors to do it. Remember, our goal is to get vegetation down because we want our notice of termination. And they said all slopes prior to putting on erosion control materials, you should be soil prepped. And they go, yeah, they left it just like that. Well, the contractor got to do whatever they wanted. The one that's 52% effective is track walking. It takes a lot of time, takes a lot of diesel to do that. 52%, it behooved Caltrans, because they were getting fined, it behooved them to make this a pay item. The only way you're going to make this fair, you can fight with the contractor or make it a pay item and put it down. So I'm urging you, some of these BMPs, put them down as pay items. Or you're going to get it in the long run, you know? And so it's 52% effective. That's how it works. Can you play this one? If we had an acre of slope like this, and with real erosion, we could expect 30 to 50 tons per acre to come off of that slope. 1 acre of slope like this. To track walk it, it's 52% effective. We reduced the sediment coming off of that. It was what did I say, 1 acre at 50 tons, and we're getting half of that, so now there's only 25 tons per acre per year coming off that site. Those of you that use Russell, you can run Russell on this. And so this is a really effective BMP, don't forget. It's not good to run it up and down, because Junior will run like a gangster. We want to make sure that the water never gets around behind our structure. If our water gets around behind our structure, we want to make sure we have a very strong tieback or keyway at the upstream end. This trench in here, filled with a lot of large stone, provides that protection. If water was ever able to get around behind it, this structure right here will force the water back into the river. Right here we have a really good example of track walking. Track walking is a method using the bulldozer to roughen up the surface of the slope. It's in the realm of surface roughening. You know, we have to prepare the soil before we seed it or mulch it. This particular technique is using a bulldozer to track walk the slope. Walk the bulldozer up and down the slope so the grouser tracks are perpendicular flow. Really effective technique. It's a structural technique before you even bring your hydromulch and stuff out. It reduces erosion. In fact, Caltrans study shows that it reduces erosion by 52%, just this technique alone. Provides roughness on the slope face. The water can't ever build up speed. Junior raindrop, you know, slows down. He's got to maybe infiltrate into the soil. So every one of these grooves from the grouser is an area where seed will collect, moisture will collect. Chances are we're going to get most of our vegetation growing in these grooves. Now, one of the things about track walking is it increases surface roughening. So by track walking the slope, we've increased our surface area by 25 or 30%. So if we're applying a mulch or a hydraulic mulch on here, now we have much more area to cover. So we might need to increase our application rate by 25, 30% because we've got so much more surface area. Good job. You can see it works in clay, works in silt, works in sand. Probably the only limitation of track walking is how steep can you get your dozer up. This is 2 to 1, slightly steeper than 2 to 1, and they had no problem at all track walking this.
Yeah, this is probably one of the simplest techniques. We've always got a bulldozer on site. Just turn that bulldozer around, have the operator walk it up and down the slope, and you reduce erosion by 52%. It's almost a must on every construction site that you possibly can track walk it. Technique that he's doing here is another form of surface roughening. It's called serrated slopes. He's using the teeth on the bucket of the excavator to try to get some serrations going.
This large project, we put longitudinal peak stone toe, live siltation. This whole design was a training workshop, and it was also a $2 million project. This is the main north-south highway for Alberta, and Alberta DOT is so stoked about learning some of these techniques. So anyway, we had a workshop going on at the same time, and we're trying to save this highway. And so we either track walk it, and we had 35 engineers in the province out there, or you could use this articulated excavator. Okay, go ahead and play this.
It's going relatively horizontally. He's trying to keep them as horizontal as he possibly can. Again, like track walking, it's going to slow up the rainfall from rolling down the slope. It's going to provide maybe some little pockets for some of the seed to collect, and provide some, the serrations in the slope will slow the runoff down. That's another nice technique. If you possibly can on cut slopes, you'll at least try to serrate them. The alternative to this, we've always cleaned off the slopes, but a lot of times the operator the easier way is to scratch the slopes down, and then we have our serrations running up and down the slope, which actually are incipient rills ready to form. So you've got to groom these slopes anyway. Let's groom them horizontal. Just remember that. Always try to keep it horizontal so that that raindrop rolling down the slope has to slow down. And can you leave the slope as rough as possible so you have a seed bed where those seeds can actually become established? That's critical.
Okay, so it reduced runoff, it increases infiltration rate. Now, the question earlier was what kind of slopes can you track walk on? And the video here says, you know, we can do it on almost all slopes. Sandy slopes, they want to fail a little bit, but they're not going to get overly compacted. Clay slopes, you don't want to track walk it too much, you're going to over-compact. Why would over-compacting be a problem? No. We want water to go in, infiltrate a little bit. We're not in unless you're in the highway prism or the engineered section, we would love the water to go in. In fact, vegetation likes 85% compaction, 85 to 90. So we got Caltrans geotech engineers. If we had highways and we had the right-of-way, we have an opportunity on the right-of-way. Safety has a 12-foot wide recovery section, and then off from that could be decompacted. In fact, the angle of repose is 2 to 1, and they agreed that soils would stand at 2 to 1 naturally. We don't need to be having 95% compaction. Does that make sense? You got your highway prism here, you've got your other part of the highway. That's an opportunity to infiltrate and grow veg. Don't compact it to 95, 85, or 90. Does that make sense? So it was quite a political process to get geotech engineering involved in it too. Okay, so we got our toolbox now. Our toolbox, you know, I'm a contractor also, and I was a handyman for a while, and I wanted to keep my tools lined up. Like I didn't want to grab for a pipe wrench when this lady wanted me to paint her house, you know? You grabbed the wrong tool. We're always grabbing the wrong tool. Grab the silt fence, grab the fiber roll. What's the problem? You got acres of bare soil. What's the problem? I want to grab out of my erosion control BMPs. I want to grab there. That would be mulching, erosion control blankets, compost blanket, and straw mulch. That would be for Cush for his tush, right? I don't want to grab the wrong tool because it's raindrop impact. Or I'm going to put my runoff control BMPs in there and sediment control BMPs over in the other section. And these are going to be sections I'm going to talk about later today also. So roughness, track walking, it makes nice little, Idaho makes nice little places for the seed to catch and moisture to catch for plant establishment. There's step slope, slope rounding. I just want to mention while this picture's up, this is a BFM. This was a training we did down in northeast Los Angeles County. And they had track walked this slope and they did not intend to, the highway department did not intend to complete the slope. Why put grass down on it? They would have to remove it. A little bit of fiber does not damage your, too much wood in your fill. It doesn't compromise your fill. So anyway, we played this BFM on here at 4,000 pounds per acre, and we came back a year later and there had not been a bit of erosion. All the mulch was still in place. So sometimes you can buy a mulch that will last a year. They have another mulch that's like Flexterra that has coconut fibers in it. It'll last 2 years with no grasses. I think that inadequate preparation is the problem. This is in New Mexico. They ran the tracks the other way. They ran the bulldozer this way, so the grouser tracks went this way, and the stuff just fell off. This one was cleared with an excavator. The guy was trying to clean the slope and formed rills already. And Caltrans in Redding had done this one. They wanted to regrade the side. They didn't even scarify or roughen the soil. This is a highway. This is a windy canal through there. And they put the mulch down and they tacked it with a hairspray. And when the winds came, it rolled all the mulch up like a tent. So again, if you don't surface prep your erosion control, there is no guarantee they're going to work. Some kind of surface prep, some kind of surface roughening. Look at this one. This is a big tall slope down in Lompoc, California, and they use this really expensive long slope, and they use this really expensive coir netting, 9 grams per meter. And look at that, and you can see now that there's rilling going on under it, right? That's a long, long slope. That slope needed a slope interrupter. But it's really hard to put a fiber roll across that because you have to put the fiber rolls in a ditch, right? And stick the stake through, and then what, are you going to wrap over the top of it with it? No, you don't have to. We got a new technique. We could have roughened it, but the new technique that Caltrans approved, a new installation, is you don't put it in a trench. You put the fiber roll right down on top of the blanket or not, and then you use rope and twine every 2 feet on center. You put the rope down. When you pound the stake in, it pulls that rope right down on the slope. And there it is there. And I want to show you this technique on Thursday, but there's 2 methods for putting in your fiber rolls, your straw wattles, whatever, your compost socks. You can go right through the heart, we call it the vampire, through the heart every 4 feet, or go 2 foot staggered with rope across with no trench. My guys like to not dig a trench, so they would rather do the rope. It's one extra stake per foot. There it is, the stake and twine method. Big believer on it, especially if the things are going to be, if your compost socks or your bio socks are going to be put in a waterway where there's going to be hydraulic pressure, and the bigger the roll is and the more water that gets ponded up, the more hydrostatic pressure there is, the more chance there's the buoyant effect of water, like sitting in a bathtub, it's going to raise that thing up, boom, it's going to go under it, and you've lost. So you really should use rope and twine when you're in ditches or channels. And there it is in a channel. We use a lot of fiber rolls for a temporary to slow the water down in a channel in Caltrans. And notice when you do your fiber rolls on a compound slope, make it so it has a little J-hook on the end. A little J-hook. This is where your sediment's there's your pond. It catches, hooks, there's the pond. If you don't put that pond in, the water just keeps going along, same with the silt fence, and then until it forms a gully. We got to use the J-hooks judiciously. Judiciously, that's good. I should put that in my next show. I'm going to go kind of fast through some of these. There's stepping slopes, there's serrated slopes, there's cut the steps, save the topsoil, what little bit there is in the deserty, like on your leeward side, and then you could just put a little bit of that seed and special duff back That's what they're doing in San Diego. And anyway, Caltrans continued to do more testing, and what was the effectiveness of straw mulch was 94% effective. What was the effectiveness of bonded fiber matrix? 96%. The effectiveness of erosion control blankets, 90+%. And then the costs were relative. And then this is wood chips, and that's compost. Look at that compost going down. That's one of my projects. I put 700 yards of compost down on this old burn dump that was restored. And that's steeper than 1-to-1 slope, and that stuff never moved. And I was able to really reestablish native vegetation. Now, from now on, when I use the word compost, it means it's been composted. It's gone through 37 days of composting, cooking. It reaches 130 some degrees for so many days. It's turned and aerated, and then it's set to age and cure. This is not compost. This is wood chips. People keep telling me, John, how can you put those compost? I've seen wood chips float and fail. Compost doesn't act like wood chips. It doesn't float. It's really heavy. New techniques came out, like the rope and twine method, type 2, installation. If you're going to do TRMs, this is some studies we did. I want to make sure that you understand that TRMs, the critical thing with turf reinforcement mats, now these are stronger erosion control blankets. They're for Junior and the gang. They know these kids are in trouble, and they're going to make this really strong. The thing you have to do, whether your ditch is parabolic, trapezoidal, every 20 feet you have to have a check slot. Your TRM has to go in the ground and be anchored down there, so if water gets under it, it has to come to the top again. ECTC, Erosion Control Technology Center, the manufacturers of these blankets, said it's okay if you don't do a trench, a check slot, you put 2 rows of staples, 4 inches apart, and 2 inches by 4 inches apart, every 2 inches. So you got a double row of staples. So that water gets under the blanket, it's got to come back up, because Junior and his gang will run under the blanket and erode. You need a check slot for those to work properly. And now, Caltrans Stormwater Pollution Prevention Training, we did this training for all the DOTs. I did this around 400 of these over an 8-year period. We went to we have 11 districts in California, and we did this hands-on demonstration. It was really good for the DOT staff to go through this. They would feel the products and get to see it, and we'd hydroseed and hydromulch. The thing is, we would be in Compton, California, Wilmington Avenue, drive-by shooting, San Bernardino. No place was safe. You can't go anymore. What you got? Okay. Is that an absolute? Okay. Okay. So let me just get to the point here. We decided to build an erosion control training facility at Shasta College, let everybody come to the college rather than having these unsafe places to do a lot of our training and demonstrations. And we built hills and all sorts of cool things. All right, how's that?